You're listening to Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall on CJAD 800.
That is James Mennie. He is over at the Montreal Gazette. Jim, might as well start with Francois Legault. We know, of course, he's in New York, being lauded by a variety of people, including apparently Al Gore. We talked about this with Jean-François Lisée later in the show. But I did hear a clip, and I'm guessing this is what you're talking about. One of the questions asked of him today was, will Quebec sort of go along with a decision by the feds, of course, to get rid of GST to help develop new construction? And his answer was pretty telling.
Well, his answer was no. It's been estimated to be $1.5 billion in lost revenue, and essentially says that's too expensive. And the other problem is, it's great to paint him as a villain. And it's great to turn around and say, Francois Legault, and they're always button heads with Ottawa. They got $900 million in housing funds, but they can't agree over how it's supposed to be spent. Have you heard a word from Trudeau or any of the provincial governments? Because apparently Ontario has agreed to lift its sales tax. BC has agreed to lift its sales tax. And Newfoundland has agreed to lift it. Have you heard any details on this, that you have to build affordable housing? Because I'm not really sure what the point of all this is. I thought the shortage was the housing crisis, the housing shortage isn't about units; it's about affordable units.
Yeah, you're
and
right.
I haven't seen any decision or conditions made to this. Because frankly, even in Quebec, if Legault had signed off on this, that would be 17% overall on my construction costs, and I could build, as long as it's a rental, I can build whatever I want. So I'm a little confused over all of this, but quite frankly, once again, Quebec puts itself on the map. Frankly, when Legault gets back from his glory tour in New York City, he may have a bit of difficulty defending this in the National Assembly. But all that said, I just as a taxpayer, I have a lot of questions about this, because it's great to say I'm going to do this. We all know when Trudeau went back to school, so to speak, at the House of Commons on Monday, he had to pull some rabbits out of his hat, and among those rabbits was this GST rebate on the construction of rental housing. I didn't say the words low cost or affordable in there. So yeah, there's a lot of gray areas, but once again, at first blush, I don't think Legault's making a mistake here.
It's interesting. I had not paid attention to that either. You're right. I don't think there was a condition attached to that. I think the thinking, the way Justin Trudeau said it was, look, if we get rid of this, it'll spur more people to build, and that will address our housing problem, without the words affordable or social even having come up. But maybe I'm wrong. Well,
this is it, because I have a rather creepy feeling that there's a kind of in the back of somebody's mind here, or these politicians are saying, well, if we build more houses or we build more units, there'll be a, God help me, trickle-down effect that people will move. And I don't think that's the way it works at all. I think, and one of the reasons, certainly the stumbling blocks we're seeing in Montreal, and you've had, landlords on the show, we're not a charity. I'm not a swine, but I'm not here to take a loss. It just seems all very improvised. It all seems, like pulled out of the air at the last minute, just take the heat off. But I really think that these sort of like boutique moves are in themselves going to be not enough to deal with an issue which I think has a lot of moving parts. I think it's more than just a matter of the economy, or I think we have a lot of issues here that have been going on at least for the past 5 years, in terms of employment, in terms of savings, in terms of where the economy is going. And the fact is, these little nifty quick fixes, I don't think are going to do the job.
And yet other provinces seem to be getting on board, not by like huge numbers, but I think 3 or 4 other provinces have agreed to do this.
Well, you got BC, you've got Ontario, which, let's face it, a lot of folks live there. And you've got Newfoundland, Labrador. And once again, maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe they have announced, but I've been looking and I haven't seen any mention of it. The words affordable housing. But to me, this is the crux of the issue. People are not, finding places to live because they can't afford them. But then again, we talk about, poverty or the famous poverty line. Everyone seems to have a different definition of what it takes to make ends meet. And until we arrive at some kind of realistic medium, and the government takes this issue by the horns and says, listen, we're going to fund the construction of these units, and these units will cost no more than X dollars a month, I think everyone's time is being wasted here.
Yeah, it seems to me the wrong people benefit in these circumstances. And if the Quebec government is going to say it could have cost them $1.5 billion, I think is what I read in the piece, Jim. Couldn't like even half of that be allocated towards just building affordable housing? Wouldn't that be a more logical way to go about doing things?
But isn't that the announcement we're waiting to hear? Because I didn't hear the words.
Yeah.
Like I say, I didn't hear those words from Trudeau. I haven't heard those words from Legault. And remember, Legault is really focused. He wants Quebec to be prosperous. He wants everyone to have les jobs payants. He doesn't want to have les jobs in. He was a politician in the 80s and the 90s, and he saw the effects of the recession on Quebec. So he wants this to be a big-time deal. So maybe he thinks that perhaps the whole idea of being perceived to constructing so-called affordable housing is a kind of political defeat on his part. But all that said, this issue seems to be for real, and I think there's a lot of people are doing a slow burn over it. And maybe we won't see the consequences today, but down the road, if you've got a lot of people who realize that they can't afford to get that first foothold into this perceived social ladder that we all have to climb, I think there's going to be problems.
All right, let's talk about passports. What are you mad about now? So you weren't mad about the redesign. Is it I heard that the covers are curling? What's the issue here?
Well, they're kind of goofy. No, and Michelle Garner-Rempel, who's a conservative MP, basically asked the House, how much did it cost? Not just how much did it cost for the redesign, okay? And the reply that she got was the redesign and the machinery to make these, passports, which remain little booklets, okay? They're like back in the day of bank books. They're not that big, okay? $283 million, which works out, if you're doing the calculation, as $70 for every single person living in Canada, which I think is a bit high. And it was so funny because when this story broke, all the Liberal cabinet ministers are being scrubbed as they come out, and they're all focusing on, it was a matter of making the passport more secure. And there's no mention of any security issues here. And quite frankly, at that price, unless you've got, say, a DNA-activated self-destruct mechanism in the passport, okay, which means if anyone else handles it but you, it explodes, I think we kind of got taken to the cleaners on this one.
You think?
And in fact, the government had budgeted no more than $161 million for this whole job, and it came in just, $100 million over budget.
As you say this, Jim, I can't help but think to myself, who did the passports? McKinsey? Did they have a printing division now, or how does that work? So I'm sure that they may have provided some advice. Yeah.
But it was the appropriately named Canadian banknote company that in fact got the contract. And I think Rempel was simply trying to just stir up some guff with what happened to Terry Fox and the Vimy Memorial.
Yeah.
And as I've said in the past, I didn't even look at those.
But beyond that, just this idea that something could come in at one price. We have that with construction issues all the time in this province, right? How does that happen for something like a paper passport? I mean, it seems completely ludicrous.
I think it's become the norm now, guys. I think that's the real issue. But honestly, I mean, and you know what it's like, because you do the show every day, and we're talking about topics like this every day, and after a while, the numbers start to blur. But every now and then, you get something like this, a very tangible, imaginable product, and you're seeing this thing, and it's like nearly $300 million to change this, and I guess they'll be phased in. And as far as I'm concerned, there's something really wrong with this picture, and it's not the fact that Terry Fox isn't in it.
Yeah. This is the ArriveCAN app all over again, right? The fact that they spent all this money when it turns out a couple of weeks or whatever months later, someone says, hey, we could have done this for a couple of million instead of $100 million. And it never seems to stop.
Well, and then, you could argue that kind of spending is in itself. I realize there are global factors in the rate of inflation, but spending money like a crazy person, it may be a contributing factor. And as far as I'm concerned, I really hope that the Auditor General is sick on this particular issue, because as far as I'm concerned, I smell fish.
Hear, hear. James Mennie, he is over at the Montreal Gazette. Thank you, Jim.
Adamant.